I'd like to welcome you to our community event. Please take a moment to please mute your cell phones. And if you notice I pause, this is audience participation. Okay, while you're doing that, I'd like you to meet the legendary ladies. They're a volunteer educational nonprofit organization founded in 1992. Their mission is to promote the history of women in the West and write them back into the history by highlighting their accomplishments, because we know they had a lot. Your questions are welcome. They'll have time at the end of the show for those. Now, if you please travel back in time with us to hear the stories of the real women who made significant impact in the West, please welcome Sharon Nels with the legendary ladies.
Thank you. Welcome here this evening. Please thank Robin for inviting us to visit with you today. The women of the West were quite varied. You need only look at the clothing they're wearing or listen to the stories they tell to understand this. Often, some came west with husbands or fathers who were in search of gold, opportunity, or land in the West. Often the land they encountered was quite different from the one they left behind, and many had to learn new skills in order to survive. But each was met with a challenge due to their gender or the path they chose. Some women came for their own reasons, and others were born here. So let's take a step back in time and learn these stories of these legendary ladies. Let's welcome the first woman inducted to the Automotive Hall of Fame, Alice Ramsey. My, how long have you been driving?
I've been driving since the first Model T hit the road. And at age 22, I made automotive history. The first woman to drive all the way across the United States, wearing this outfit, and driving the latest model Maxwell touring car with right-hand drive, a turn crank starter, top speed 40 miles an hour. I'm Alice Ramsey, and on June 9, 1909, I left New York City, headed for San Francisco. The Maxwell Motor Company was sponsoring the trip. They called it From Hell Gate to Golden Gate. A publicity stunt to prove that a woman could go anywhere in her Maxwell. Back then, many believed women were too fragile to drive or even ride in automobiles. Not me. I fell in love with motoring the year before when my husband John bought me a 2-seater roadster. That summer, I drove thousands of miles just exploring New Jersey with my friends. And after I won this bronze medal at an endurance run, Maxwell's publicity manager approached me. "You're the best woman driver I've ever seen," and he proposed this venture. A man had done it, so why not a woman? My crew included John's proper older sisters, Nettie and Maggie, and my teenage friend Hermione. I was the only driver and my own mechanic, so while the others finagled away to pack their big flowery hats, I was much more concerned with inner tubes, patches, and chains for the smooth canvas tires. And even with the big folding top up, we always wore ponchos or these dusters to keep out the dirt and the rain. The company hired Mr. J.D. Murphy to travel ahead by train and keep track of us. He arranged lodging and publicity and recruited local drivers to lead us through all this uncharted territory. We were traveling with very few roads, no maps, no road signs, and often no idea where we were. When in doubt, I followed the telegraph wires. They always led to a house or a town. And Nettie, my navigator over here, brought along the 1908 AAA guidebook, but it led to situations like this one outside Cleveland. She read, "At 11.6 miles, turn right at the yellow house and barn." There were no yellow buildings in sight, so I drove down the road and saw a woman in her garden. "Excuse me, where's the road to Cleveland?" "Ladies, turn around and go back to the green buildings. The man who lives there is against automobiles, so he painted his house and barn green to confuse drivers." At another crossroads, a woman was waiting for us in her garden. Yoo-hoo! Are you those ladies driving from New York to San Francisco? I read about your trip, and I just had to see you. And in Chicago, an eager crowd greeted us at our downtown hotel. Now there, the Maxwell people supplied us with block and tackle and a stout towing rope, saying, "Ladies, you'll need these from now on." Well, sure enough, Iowa was a basin of mud and rain. I had to concentrate so hard just to keep the Maxwell on the road that we ran out of gas. Well, there were no filling stations. It took half a day just to find someone to bring us fuel. Next thing we knew, the radiator boiled dry. Well, rainwater was everywhere. We had no containers to carry it. Nettie and Maggie solved the problem. They emptied their small cut glass cosmetic holders and filled the tank with ditch water, ounce by ounce, repeating our Operation Cut Glass twice more before we reached the next village. Now, with all this horrible mud and muck, the trusty 30 horsepower engine, often stalled, real horses had to come to the rescue. One time I paid a young man with a horse to pull me out of this huge mud hole. He then walked ahead to the next hole, waited, and charged me double. Now, most of the time someone was traveling with us, but one evening we did find ourselves all alone in front of an overflowing creek and had to sleep in the Maxwell. My feet on the dash, the steering wheel, poking my stomach. Next morning, thank goodness the water was down. So we quickly packed up and slithered through that creek into more rain. Would it ever end? Well, no, not till you get into Nebraska, said the men in Boone, Iowa. Put that Maxwell on a flat car and ship it to Omaha. You girls take the train. Oh, I was tempted. But that would be cheating. I will drive every inch of the way. To lighten the load, the girls did take the train ahead, and I picked them up in a couple days, a plan we used several more times. Finally, I left all that Iowa gumbo behind, crossed the Missouri River into Nebraska, where we slogged through sand most of the way to Wyoming. Oh, we were truly in the West. Big sky, high mountains, howling coyotes, and driving on these rugged wagon trails that ended in the middle of nowhere. We had to cross cattle ranches, stopping to open the gate and make sure we closed them behind us. One morning, we had quite a surprise when a dozen Indians on horseback rushed up alongside the Maxwell, bows and arrows drawn. Suddenly, a huge jackrabbit jumped out of the brush, and off they went, as so did we. While crossing the Great Salt Lake Desert, I amused myself by watching those cute little prairie dogs. But when the entire front end collapsed through Mr. Prairie Dog's front door, I was not amused. A local rancher helped us wire the entire front end together, and we basically limped along until we came to this enormous gully. Well, I slowly and carefully inched the disabled Maxwell down, across, and over to the other side. And then we got the news. You think this is bad? You ought to see the one 6 miles ahead. Well, I knew that disabled Maxwell could go no further. But 2 days later, with her new axle installed, we were on our way. By Reno, Nevada, I was homesick for my husband and little boy. I still had 200 miles and 2 mountain passes to cross. Yet, victory was in sight. And on August 7th, I drove the Maxwell off the ferry into San Francisco. We were greeted with cheers, honking horns, and a parade. What a day. What a journey. I had driven 3,800 miles in 59 days and changed 11 flat tires to become the first woman to drive coast to coast, proving what I know to be true. Good driving has nothing to do with one's sex. It's all above the collar. Happy motoring, everyone.
Okay, we have to take a little time to change microphones for the recording. So I will tell you that if you look in the early history books, like this one from 1922, women are not even mentioned. It was not until the early 60s that women started to be written back into the history books, so people could know about how famous we were and how much work we did. Okay. Florence Lawrence was not only America's first publicized movie star, but a pioneer in more ways than one. Please welcome Florence Lawrence.
Well, here I am in front of the famous MGM studios, and am I excited. Today they're going to make a special production, a documentary, to honor those of us who grace the screens before talkies, and I'm in it. Just think, they remember me, Florence Lawrence, the Biograph girl. It's been some time, but many of us early actors changed the motion picture system. I was about 3 when Mother put me on stage as Baby Flo. That didn't scare me. I grew up on stage. My mother, Lottie Lawrence, was a vaudeville actress in Canada who formed her own production company. Acting is a business, and Mom kept it moving by moving us from town to town, and eventually in 1906 to New York and then New Jersey. I was no longer a baby, and I was ready for bigger and more adventurous roles. Competing with my brothers, I was quite athletic. So I took horsemanship along with deportment, and this would pave the way into my first jobs. About this time, Thomas Edison developed the kinetoscope, which allowed people, one by one, to view small scenes in a movie through a deep hole in top of the device. In fact, it was Mr. Edison who first noticed me when I auditioned for his movie short about Daniel Boone. I was thrilled when he gave me a small part. He could see that I could create many moods with my face and gestures. I could cry on cue. Motion pictures then evolved onto larger screens for bigger audiences. Other studios began calling on me to act in their rollicking tales. I rode on horses, fell off buildings, and rushed down rivers on a log. No stunt doubles. Being in silent movies, we had to count on action to make our story. Good actor could make you cheer the hero, boo the villain, gasp in awe at all of the many stunts, and of course always swoon with the heroine in the space of 10 or 15 minutes. They called them shorts for a reason. My next move was to Biograph Studios under the direction of D.W. Griffith. His stories focused on one person. He called them biographs. I starred in over 100 of them and became the Biograph girl. Then he wrote a series about a Mrs. Jones, so I became Mrs. Jones. That chapter each week ended in a cliffhanger, and the audiences would always come back on Saturday to see what happened. But no one knew my name. Actors were not given credits in the marquee because the studios figured this individual recognition would encourage us to demand more money. When I moved to the next studio, there was a vindictive story in the newspapers. Biograph girl dies in automobile crash. Was my career over? Well, my director, Carl Lemley, had a good idea. He set up a trip for my husband and me with a stop in St. Louis, Missouri. Soon as I stepped onto that platform, I was immediately surrounded. There were photographers and reporters everywhere. That did it. They knew I was alive. So for first time, my name was published. And then the studios started hearing from the fans. This publicity worked better than they expected. Other actors started getting the same attention. The studio soon realized they made more money by putting our names on the marquee. I convinced them they should pay the actors and the stagehands better, and it would make us more loyal to the studios. I'm glad to be a part of that change and happy that we benefit from that recognition. However, this stardom did cost me a high price. The adulation became overwhelming when the crowds insisted on crowding my every move. It was unnerving. I was determined to have some peace. I was earning over $500 a week, so I bought an automobile. I love driving. That 1914 Packard gave me the freedom that I wanted. The freedom, the wind in my hair, and no other sound but the purring of my motor. My father built horseless carriages, so I knew the mechanics under the hood. I repaired my own automobile. I loved my Packard. I enjoyed it. But hit and runs were common. Rules of the road were not enforced. I was determined to avoid these accidents. So, after months of study, I developed the left turn signal and stop signal. These were mechanical and I installed them myself. However, I did not apply for a patent in time, so I am not credited. But if you arrived here safely today, you may thank me. As life is wont to do, mine took an abrupt left turn with no warning signal. In 1916, I was on the second story of a set when a fire broke out during filming. From the second floor, on fire, I leaped out the window and landed on my back. I was badly burnt and broken. It took 4 long years of recovery. By the time I was healed, I could get small parts, but talkies had pretty much taken over the industry. There were no longer any place for me. Until today, when I got this invitation from the Louis B. Mayer to be in his special production. I'm back. Thank you.
Now, the Legendary Ladies began in 1992. Originally, they worked in Central City as the Shady Ladies. Later, deciding to do more work on historical women and present them, they became the Legendary Ladies. We have over 50 different characters, and if you look on our website, we have many shows that are open to the public that you're welcome to join. So you might check out our website, legendaryladies.org. We're ready for our next contestant, I was going to say. Our next Legendary Ladies. This gutsy physician treated all types of ailments, including the deadly Spanish influenza of 1918. Please welcome Dr. Susan Anderson.
Ma'am, it's Dave. Dave is all torn up from the barbed wire. He's hurt bad. Ma'am, I heard you were a doctor. Please help. Dave is all I got. That's what the young man said to me inside the general store in Fraser, Colorado. I had a dilemma. I didn't want anyone to know I was a doctor yet, not until I was well from the tuberculosis, and I needed more time to heal. But my Hippocratic oath gave me no choice. I ran home, picked up my medical bag, and followed the cowboy to a corral. "Where's Dave?" He pointed to a horse. It was common for country doctors to treat livestock, but I felt like a fool. Well, no matter, with help, I got that horse untangled and sewn up. After that, folks decided I was a good healer in spite of being a woman. I cured myself, and I saw patients all over Fraser and Middle Park. While I charged 25 cents for a house call, I rarely collected cash, but lots of firewood. 10 years later, in a single day, officials canceled church. They canceled school. They even had to forbid some people from attending funerals. In 1918, the worst pandemic ever to hit this planet, Spanish influenza, arrived. No one knew what to do about this horrible disease, let alone this country physician. I am Susan Anderson, medical doctor. Some folks call me Doc Susie. Denver doctors told me about the Spanish influenza. Some said it originated in the trenches in France during the last months of the Great War. Some said it started in a military camp in Fort Riley, Kansas. It was a massive outbreak which began as a nasty cold that either got better in a few days or killed the patient. This flu often skipped the young and elderly, but sucked the life from robust adults in their 20s, including servicemen. While we won the Great War, Spanish influenza was the deadliest battle. I worked day and night going from house to house. So many needed my help, and if I could not get to them within 12 hours of onset, they often died. Bodies were everywhere, in houses, on the roads, dumped in graveyards. I'd never felt so helpless. Now, doctors knew it spread by coughs and by simply breathing, especially in crowds, but no one knew how to cure it, not even the Surgeon General of the United States. His advice? Avoid wearing tight shoes and gloves. The Spanish flu disappeared as quickly as it came, simply vanished. In 16 months, it killed 50 million people around the world, from the United States to the South Sea Islands. With the invention of the electron microscope 2 decades later, scientists discovered a virus caused the disease. It never came back again. I saw many ways to prevent other diseases. I was often called to lumber camps to treat a malady, and while there, I gathered women and children for physical exams and administered smallpox and diphtheria vaccinations. Then I inspected the area, spotting poor health practices. Move that privy away from the creek. We don't want a typhoid epidemic here. Any good doctor knows an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I kept my medical bag stocked with standard supplies, including bundles of dressings that I boiled and ironed to kill bacteria, a dental kit, and surgical tools. On a typical day, I might stitch a laceration, pull a tooth, and deliver a baby on the kitchen table. When I could, I traveled by train to Colorado General Hospital in Denver for supplies and caught up with medical physicians and got the latest updates on medical advances. They knew I worked under primitive conditions without a laboratory or x-ray machine. I'm proud to say those Denver doctors considered me the best diagnostician on the Western Slope. However, it did not take a doctor to diagnose drunkenness. Banning booze would make my job easier. Many medical problems stem from alcohol abuse, seizures, beatings, gunshot wounds. Drinking alcohol ruined lives. Now, I used it for one reason, to get my patients through surgery. Since I never stocked narcotics, I told many a wife, go ahead, give a little whiskey for the pain. So I was thrilled when Prohibition finally passed in 1920. Colorado had been dry for 4 years already, but most folks figured out how to get around it. One way was Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound, made from herbs and 20% alcohol. Advertisers claimed, cures all women's ills, including a craving for alcohol. I told my patients, it's mostly liquor. Throw it out. I don't think they heeded my advice. And well, anyway, most folks brewed their own hooch. I asked Sheriff Fletcher why he couldn't stop them. He said, if I arrested every moonshiner, all the men in Grand County would be in jail, including county officials and state legislators. Then who would vote for me? Fraser Valley became prime moonshine territory for Denver's crime bosses looking to make a profit. Everyone knew I hated those bootleggers, so the sheriff deputized me and included me on many raids. I'd grab my medical bag, my hat, and my axe, join up with the treasury men and deputies in the forest. The sheriff would yell, "You are all under arrest," and then I'd start. I love smashing those stills with my axe. White lightning poured out of those barrels. Prohibition was an exciting time for me. I may have been a little eccentric since I never threw anything away. My house was full, but I created narrow pass-through stacks of books, catalogs, and newspapers. I even hid my cash in those stacks. Eventually, I had little space for patients, no room for food. So I often dropped in at mealtime at people's homes whenever I felt like it. I did not eat much, and I liked to visit. Besides, it was a good way to collect on some bills. I heard Charlie Warner bagged himself an elk. Hot elk stew tonight. Thank you.
Now, of course, we have members of our organization. We have over 20 members, different ladies, and each different lady creates her own character and researches it, writes a script, and gets the character ready for performance. They make their costume or figure out a way to find a costume and then perform that character for you. And that's why we have over 50 different characters, because some of our members do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different characters, and they're all very good. So be checking that website if you want to see them, because each show we may have a different set of characters. I think I was here 2 or 3 years ago as Klondike Kate of the Yukon, and we're still waiting for the microphone. So there's a lot of different characters. We have characters from all different eras, from World War II to 1800s. I think we're ready. All right. Mary Elich served as a powerful role model, at a time when women had fewer options. Please welcome Mary Elich Long.
It's twilight in Elich Gardens. What do you think you see? It's me, Mary Elich Long, and I'm excited to take you on a fantasy tour of Elich Gardens that only you can see. My husband, John Elich, and I purchased the 16-acre Chilcott Farms and turned it into Elich Gardens. It had apple orchards and many tall cottonwood trees. We planted flowers and bushes along the pathways throughout the orchards, and the gardens became so beautiful, we opened it up to the public in 1890. That first season was a tremendous success. We grossed an unbelievable $35,000 by the time the gates closed on Labor Day. Unfortunately, the following March, 1891, my husband caught pneumonia and died. Now a 34-year-old widow, I was totally lost. But knowing John's vision for the gardens, I was determined to carry on. So I undertook the entire management myself. Oh, can you imagine the difficulties I encountered? But I'm so proud to know that people from all over the world have enjoyed Elich Gardens. Let's start the tour at the entrance. Isn't the entrance just grand? We have over 65,000 blooming plants greeting our visitors. Did you know this was Denver's first botanical gardens? And with all the tall cottonwood trees, it makes a perfect place to bring a picnic. Listen to the pipe organ furnishing the music for the carousel. Have you ever seen a carousel as unique as this one-of-a-kind work of art? There are 46 hand-carved animals decorated in amazing detail. They were patterned after the animals in our zoo. This is Dewey, one of my favorite bears. We've added many attractions to the amusement park. Our figure-8 toboggan roller coaster was an immediate hit with the crowds. Oh, I love hearing the screams of the riders and the sound of the carousel's pipe organ. I never had children of my own, but I love being around them. So I started Children's Day. Each Tuesday of the summer belongs to the children of Colorado. Oh, I am a child again when I'm with them. We play games and have animal study using the animals in the zoo for illustration. Next on the path is our zoo. Did you know I was the first woman in the world to own a zoo? After my beloved John died, the animals became an important part of my life. Imagine having a bear for a pet, or lion cubs sleeping in your bed. I shared my life with some wonderful animals every day. They became my family. Some of the animals had been circus performers and knew lots of tricks. Sam the bear was a splendid dancer. For many years, instead of dancing with a man, Sam and I would waltz together to entertain the crowd. Sam and Dewey were my favorite bears, and each evening as the park prepared to close, they would be let out of the bear pit. Sometimes they would lumber past late-day visitors, which was usually enough to clear the gardens. Oh. And then there was our naughty monkey dude. He would run up to the lady, grab their hats right off their head, scamper up the tree, and pull all the flowers and feathers off. Oh, so many times that monkey was in timeout. Oh, I have so many wonderful animal stories, but we must continue on with our tour. Next on the path is our 8-sided theater that John designed. Notice the dome roof. It was patterned after the famous Globe Theatre in London, England, where Shakespeare's plays had been performed. Oh, John would be so proud to know that it is the park's favorite attraction. We've added the first movie ever seen in the American West. Many famous actors have performed here. You know how I was able to attract the finest actors to the theater? I made sure they were paid the same salary as they received in New York or San Francisco. Oh, come with me down the hall. I want to show you the old stage door. All of the actors that have performed at the theater have autographed the old gray stage door. It's strange, but notice, it seems the more famous the actor, the smaller and more obscure is the signature. Oh, right there is Douglas Fairbanks' signature and Ginger Rogers. Way down here, that's Cecil B. DeMille. So many wonderful actors. I have such fond memories of them. And right over here is my personal box seats. Many of my friends have joined me in my box seats. We have seen so many wonderful shows. I feel so alive when I'm in this theater. I just never want to leave. I hired Thomas Long to manage the theater, and we were more than friends. We married in 1900. Then Thomas decided he wasn't interested in managing the theater. He would rather grow plants and design flower beds. So there was a little tension in our marriage. But I became a widow a second time when Thomas crashed his motor car down a steep mountain curve. In 1916, I sold the gardens to John Mulvihill, who added the Trocadero Ballroom. Dancing lessons were offered, and tea dances were an immediate hit with the crowd. Fortunately, a strict behavior code was always in effect. White gloves required, and no cheek-to-cheek dancing, or you would be removed from the theater. After I sold the gardens, I was allowed to stay in my cottage, but relieved of all the burdens and responsibilities during my ownership. I was known as the gracious lady of the gardens. Oh, I had a wonderful and full life. But as time went on, I became old and frail. I died at the age of 80 on July 16, 1936. At my funeral, my old friend Monsignor Orion compared me to St. Francis of Assisi. Wasn't that a nice compliment? I was buried in Denver's Fairmont Cemetery next to the love of my life, John Elich Jr. But I couldn't leave the garden. Many spooky stories have been circulating since my death. People have seen my ghost floating around the grounds wearing long dresses and large feathered hats. Well, you never really leave the place you love. Part of it goes with you, leaving part of you behind. Thank you so much for allowing me to take a tour with you and tell you all of my wonderful memories.
I'll let you pass. Let's see, what else can I tell you about the legendary ladies? We travel all over. We've been to Sheridan, Wyoming to perform. We have been to some other locations. North Dakota. North Dakota, that was a fun one. So we travel throughout the state if you're willing to have us come. And if you're interested, we perform at museums, different events that people have. We've performed at fundraisers for political things. A lot of whatever you like. We'd be happy to come. Just contact our coordinator and she can tell you what we can do for you. You can have between, oh, I think they're ready. Okay. Imagine yourself a tourist in the Colorado Springs mountains and you come upon a rustic cabin and standing there greeting you is a gritty little old lady, just a little weathered old lady. Why, it's Captain Jack.
Gotcha. Howdy, folks. Come on into my tourist cabin. I call my place Jack's Cabin. I set this place up around 1900 so I could educate tourists about the rigors of mining and living in the Colorado mountains. I'm Ellen Jack, better known as Captain Jack, Lady Miner. Now, I know that trail that you take up to my cabin on horseback is bumpy, and you're probably hind sore, but make yourself as comfy as you can while I tell you about my life. Which just happens to be in print for your purchase today. Or over here, you can get yourself a right nice souvenir postcard of me, posing with my pickaxe and my jackass. If you fancy a burro ride to my mine tour, we can do that too. Only cost you a penny. Now, where was we? Oh yeah, I was going to wet your whistle with some of my stories. I remember I'm 7 years old, and an old gypsy wearing this bracelet told me, "You're gonna be a great traveler, find hidden treasure, be widowed early in life." She was right. Now, gazing on me now, you'd never guess that I was an English socialite from Nottingham, England, and I perceived the dress and the manner of the Americans to be quite crude. Yeah, things changed. When we was living in New York, I was widowed early. I lost my American husband, Captain Charles Jack. My great love, which is why I took to calling myself Captain Jack in his honor. Now, after my loss, I exchanged my English pedigree for a Smith & Wesson 44 and a stagecoach headed out west for its gold and mountain living. Remember that gypsy said I'd be a great traveler? 'Twas true. I struck out for Colorado. Now, riding a stagecoach west ain't for sissies. You gotta be mindful of robbers. I sewed my money in the bustle of my frock. Ain't no robber gonna stick his nose in them regions. And we had to cross a snowy pass. That old driver told me, "Ma'am, we can't make it. The horses is giving out." But I solved that problem. I said, "Just give me them reins, and you break the snow head of the horses with the shovels." We made it to Gunnison, and quick as fire, I became a businesswoman, supplying prospectors with mining provisions. Now, every businesswoman's got trials. Mine dealing with the local Ute Indians. Well, one night, they crept into my cabin. They's gonna steal my apples. And to my surprise, one of them crooks was Chief and Medicine Man Colorado. Why, he just stood there staring at my long blonde curls. So I got a pair of scissors, cut off a good-sized lock, and pinned it to his blanket. He just stood there stroking the curl like it had life in it. Now, several months later, I heard them same Indians was going to rob my supply freighters. Had to protect my property. But during the battle, I got struck in the head with a poisoned tomahawk. I lay delirious for days. Colorado heard I was ailing, came and saved my life with his medicine. Now, remember that gypsy said that I'd find hidden treasure? Well, treasure really was hidden from women, 'cause we wasn't allowed to go down in the mines. We women was considered bad luck. But I solved that problem. I just went and bought my own mine. The Black Queen silver mine located between Crested Butte and Aspen. Why, the men I hired were grateful to have pay and grub and worked right alongside me. Now, several men did proclaim their love for me. Oh, but I went and married a man named Walsh. Turns out he was only after my Black Queen mine. Why, one night I caught that scoundrel putting dynamite underneath my window. He was going to blow my house up with me in it. But I solved that problem, pulled my .44 and told him to leave. He just stood there shaking the deed to the mine in his hand. So I shot it right out of his hand. He went a-running. And from then on, I decided that jackasses were much better companions than men. We lived in tents when we mined. Weren't much protection in the wintertime. Well, one day a fearful storm came upon us, threatening avalanches. I hollered at my men, "Get off the mountain, save yourselves." I strapped on my snowshoes and I headed on down the mountain too. Snowslides coming at me from all directions. My face got blistered, my hands and my feet froze up. But I kept going. On my descent, I met some men who was camped on Moraine Pass. They yelled, "Stay here with us. You'll die out there." But I listened to a mysterious voice inside me that said, "Go on, go on." Well, my trek lasted all through the night. I felt avalanches a-rumbling. I heard trees cracking. I just knew one of them was going to swallow me whole. Come daybreak, I saw a sawmill camp, knocked on the door of the first cabin. I was greeted by frantic, weeping women. They was the families of those men camped on Moraine Pass. Turns out, an avalanche had taken the lives of every husband and son in that camp. Now I know why that mysterious voice told me, "Go on." Well, after 27 years of mining, I longed to settle down. So I come to Colorado Springs, bought this beautiful property, and started mining tourists. Now, solving problems is just a matter of perspective, like choosing which end of the jackass you find most appealing. And treasure really isn't hidden. It's found amongst good friends and a place to call home, like my Jack's cabin here. Now, I want to thank you for letting me bend your ear, and you can find more stories if you buy my book. If you're planning on eating at my cookhouse, grub will be served at 5 o'clock. If not, do be careful going back down that hill. Come back and see me again, and bring your friends. So long, friends.
Alice Ramsey, Florence Lawrence, Doc Susie, Mary Elich, and Captain Jack. These women survived through their wit and determination. They and countless others blazed the trail for the freedom and individuality that women enjoy today. Please join me in saluting their courage. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I thank the museum, Sandstone Ranch, for inviting us to come and visit with you today. Thank you. Enjoy your ride home. Stay safe. Out of the rain.